Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nick, Josh, and Aaron Sports Talk Radio Show. Aaron is not here today, so it's just Nick and I. So we are starting out a little bit later than usual, but we're going to get right into it and start with the World Series. Game 3 will be tonight. The first World Series game at Wrigley Field in decades, since the 40s. So I'm sure that's going to be a great atmosphere there tonight, as Wrigley has been these entire playoffs and really this entire season. It's Kyle Hendricks against Josh Tomlin, and the series is tied up at 1. So, do you have any thoughts on the World Series game tonight?
I think for big series, I mean, Cleveland took game 1. Their pitching was pretty good, like we expected it would be. But then Chicago was able to get some a little bit last game. So it'll be interesting to see how Cleveland responds now that it's tied. And they in the World Series, they do 2-3-2, right? So it's 3 straight games in Chicago, right? That's how they do it?
Yeah, it'll be 3 straight games in Chicago.
So that'll be interesting to see how the Cubs do, holding home field advantage, to see if they can get a couple wins here. Because I think if it's series tied 1-1, I think Chicago's going to win probably around 2, and maybe if not 3, and win it in Chicago. But I think they're going to get 2, and then maybe they'll go back to Cleveland if Cleveland wins that third game to force it back to Cleveland. But I think it should be a great series.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Cubs probably have the edge tonight in terms of the pitching matchup, because Kyle Hendricks has been very good this whole season. I mean, Tomlin, to his credit, has been pretty good too, but I mean, Kyle Hendricks has a 2.13 ERA, and in the postseason, he has a 1.65 ERA. So he's really been pitching really well. They've won 2 of his 3 postseason starts, and his only loss was a 1-0 loss against the Dodgers to Clayton Kershaw. So he's kind of, I think he's been their most consistent pitcher in the playoffs. Seeing as Lester had the kind of trouble in game 1 where he gave up a couple runs. So I think the Cubs definitely have the advantage tonight, and I think I don't know if they'll win all 3 games here at home, but I think they definitely, if we're looking at this just in terms of a 3-game series and for the games in Chicago, I think the Cubs definitely have a leg up on winning this 3-game series and taking it back to Cleveland with a 3-2 advantage overall.
No, yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it's going to be a little bit of an advantage for the Cubs tonight in terms of the pitching matchup. I think they're got to be a little bit favored. And interesting note is that if the next game, whatever the result of this game is, it looks like we're looking at Corey Kluber for Cleveland versus John Lackey for the next game after the one coming up. So that'll definitely be interesting to see how Chicago does. Like I said, returning home. It's the first World Series in what feels like forever. I mean, it was even before we were born, even before potentially our parents were born. So that'll just be interesting to see. I bet you it's going to be very loud. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere there at Wrigley Field. These fans are excited. They're passionate. They want to get this curse off their backs that they've had since 1908, since winning the whole thing. So I assure you that the crowd's going to be there. They're going to be supporting. They're going to be with them every step of the way for this game. Should be a terrific game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as you said, Kluber against Lackey on Saturday and Lester against Bauer on Sunday. So we'll see. The first 2 games really were complete opposites. The Indians won by 6 in the first game, and the Cubs won by 4, 5-1 in the second game. So neither game has really been close up to this point. So I think we're due for a close game. Hopefully that's tonight. If not, then hopefully definitely some of these games will be close, because as a neutral fan, I think it's obviously much better to watch a close back and forth game. But I think, I mean, both offenses looked very good in the game they won and not so good in the game they lost because, yeah, Chicago didn't score any runs in game one, and then Cleveland only scored one run on 4 hits in game two. um, so it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. I know for the Cubs, um, Kyle Schwarber, who just came back off of injury, missing basically the entire season. He came back for the World Series and DH'd and had 2 hits and 2 RBIs in Wednesday's game. He is not going to be able to play in Chicago, at least not going to be able to play a position. He's not medically cleared to play the outfield in Chicago, so he could come out as a pinch hitter, but that's about all he'd be able to do. So what do you think about Schwarber returning for the World Series?
Well, I think it gives Chicago a little bit more of a backup. You know, when they do play in Cleveland, like you said, he could DH. He's not physically cleared to play with them in their home ballpark in Chicago, but just gives them another option. You know, when like I said, when they're in Cleveland, I think he definitely helped last game. That helped them get that 5-1 win that they needed, because you don't want to go down back home to Chicago down 2-0 in the series, especially to Cleveland, who has pretty good pitching. So I think he really came up clutch for them, and the timing worked out great that he was able to come back, right, you know, when they're fighting for the World Series. So he's obviously fresh. You know, he hasn't played a lot during the regular season, so I think it's a good thing the Cubs have going for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, wondering to see how they'll adjust I mean, obviously there's no DH in the Cubs ballpark, so I think that even taking Schwarber out of the lineup, I still think that favors the Cubs, because the Indians, you know, aren't used to having their pitchers hit, and they're going to have to take out one of their players, probably Carlos Santana. Is probably going to have to come out of the game because he's been their DH and their leadoff hitter too. It's not that often that you see a DH as your leadoff hitter. That's what Santana did for them last game, and he's DH'd in both games, and so he's a pretty good hitter. He takes a lot of pitches, gets some walks. He doesn't really swing at that many bad pitches, so I assume he'd be the one that they take out, because he can really only play first base at this point, and they're not. I don't think they take out Napoli over him. So I think it'll hurt the Indians more than the Cubs, because the Cubs are used to. I mean, they're used to playing without Schwarber, and they're used to having to play with their pitcher hitting in their own ballpark.
No, I completely agree. It's going to be interesting to see how Cleveland makes that adjustment. When they're going to an NL ballpark, they have to remove their DH, which is something they're so used to having, you know, all through this World Series playoffs so far. Now they're going to have to, you know, maybe make a little adjustments with their lineup, you know, pull one of their players out, figure out who they want to be in that main starting lineup. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust and see if they can, you know, still, with that adjustment, you know, hold Chicago like they did in the first game when they blanked them 6-0. So that'll be interesting to see how both teams kind of respond to this adjustment of removing the DH, having their pitchers hit.
Yeah, definitely. Looking back to see how the Indians did. Just looking back to see how the Indians did in National League parks this season.
That'd be interesting to find out.
They went 4-6 in National League parks this season. So below 500. So not the best results for them. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to affect them more than it will the Cubs, because I mean, the Cubs obviously are used to this, as I said, because they're in the National League, obviously, so they don't really have to make that many adjustments. Like Schwarber was more of a luxury, I guess, in a sense, because he had just come back and they had played basically the entire season without him. And
No, definitely. The timing was great, too. He just came right off the injury list to help them, in this World Series playoff game here. Playoff series. What do you think? Could you see the series going 6, 7 games potentially?
yeah, I mean, I always said I thought it was going to be either a 6 or 7 game series because the teams are pretty evenly matched in terms of like their strengths. They kind of share the same strengths um, because I think their rotations have both been very good throughout this World Series. Their offenses have both been pretty good in their bullpen. I mean, it's obviously why these two teams are in the World Series because they're pretty much strong in all aspects of their roster. Because like the Cubs and the Indians both had a little stronger pitching than the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, whom they beat in their ALCS and NLCSs. So they're kind of canceling each other out in a way, and I think that's what we saw in the first 2 games. Because the Indians kind of dominated one game, but the Cubs kind of in the same way dominated the second game. So I think it's a pretty evenly matched teams, and I think it could definitely. I mean I don't see either one of these two teams sweeping all 3 games in Chicago. So I think it'll definitely go back to Cleveland for at least one, if not
This second of the 2, but okay.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
No, I like I said earlier, I think it could easily go back to Cleveland. So I mean, Chicago is very talented. They have a really great roster, top to bottom. But then so does Cleveland. I just don't think that Cleveland's one of those teams that, even if they go down 2-1 to the Cubs tonight, I still don't think they're out of it by any means. I think they're going to come back just like the Cubs did when they were down 1-0. I said to everyone, I said, "Are you worried about the Cubs?" I said, absolutely not. I said, they're going to come back just like they did against the Dodgers, 2-1, and then they end up winning that series 4-2. So I think that this is going to be a very close series. I think it's going to go back and forth. One team win this game, the other team win the next game. So I think we're probably for a 6 or 7 game series.
Yeah. I think in terms of pitching, as we said, Cubs are starting pitching matchups. Cubs probably have the advantage tonight. Then probably the Indians have the advantage.
With Kluber and starting.
Kluber, I mean, he will be going on short rest, but yeah, he did that in the ALCS. So I think they have the advantage there.
Sunday looks like Bauer against Lester.
And then, yeah, assuming Lester can get back on track from his not-so-great Game 1 start, I think the Cubs probably have the advantage there. But, yeah, I think if I were to make a prediction for the next 3 games, I would say the Cubs take 2 out of 3 on their home fields.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I don't think Cleveland's going to get swept. I just don't think they're that kind of team that's just going to go down that easily. If they're going to go down, they're going to go down fighting. And I think they definitely force this back to Cleveland. And you think the Cubs will win in 6 or 7? You predict the Cubs winning?
Yeah.
Eventually?
I'd say the Cubs in 6 or 7, yeah. I'm not sure. Because the Indians don't have an announced Game 6 starter right now. Although
it looks like Arrieta versus Josh Tomlin, from what I can tell. But this is way in the future. So
I would assume it would be Tomlin.
And the Arrieta for the Cubs.
Depends on how well Tomlin pitches tonight. If Tomlin doesn't pitch that well tonight, then it could be Merritt, who pitched that last game against the Blue Jays and pitched pretty well, pretty much coming out of nowhere to really kind of dominate the Blue Jays in that last game in Toronto.
Yeah, that was something, huh? What a game that was. I mean, here you have Toronto is one of the best offenses in the league. You have big hitters, Joey Batista, Edward Encarnacion. I mean, to shut them down like that as like a rookie pitcher that no one's ever heard of, that's a good accomplishment.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they got tons more bats. They got Josh Donaldson, they got Russell Martin, and just to beat them the way they did, only letting them win one game in that series, is incredible.
Yeah, he had pitched in 4 games in the regular season, but only started 1 game. So he just kind of came out of nowhere, for this postseason game, and I mean he only pitched 4 1/3, but he didn't give up any runs, and the Indians bullpen is pretty strong, so they, especially with Miller and Allen, so they kind of took it after that. So yeah, I think the bullpens too. And you saw in Game 1 how Miller pitched really well in Game 1, and then Game 2 it was Chapman. So now they both have had an off day, and they both will be available. Everyone in their bullpen should be available tonight. So I'm hoping it's kind of a back and forth game that's like close in the late innings, because I think that's would be entertaining for the neutral fans. So how do you think tonight will play out?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be close for a while. Maybe a team might have an outburst in one inning where they score 2-3 runs. But I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a rout like we saw, like the 6-0, the 5-1. Because I think both teams, like you said, are pretty evenly matched, and let's hope it stays close, because that makes for one entertaining World Series when it's close like that. Because if it's a blowout, you know who's going to win. There's no excitement surrounding it. So I would like to see this go 6-7 games in close games, like coming down to the last inning, or even extra innings. That'd be cool too.
Yeah, extra innings would be pretty good. Be some very nervous times for the fans at Wrigley, and
Definitely
the fans watching at home in Chicago for that matter too. I mean in Cleveland, but I mean close games are always more exciting. I think that goes without saying. But I don't know. Do you see the Indians being able to score off of Hendricks tonight? Because he's pitched pretty well in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think tonight they might struggle a little bit, which is why I think with Cleveland it might be low scoring, because Chicago's putting in a really good pitcher against them tonight. He's got a 1.65 ERA, so that's pretty good. But I just don't think that Cleveland's going to go quietly. Like you said, they're not going to go down without a fight, and they've proven that they can. They can get to the Cubs pitching. In that 6-0 drubbing that they had in Game 1, provided they were at home in that game. I still don't think that just because they're on the road at Wrigley, I don't think it makes them any less of a threat or any less dangerous to the Cubs. I think they can still get to their pitching. It just depends on how strong that Cubs pitching is, if they're able to place the balls where they want them to be. So I think that's key too, is placement.
Yeah.
And being consistent.
Pitching commands, control and commands are always what pitching is going to come down to.
I feel like that's how the Cubs beat the Dodgers in that last game when Kershaw was pitching, because I felt like his placement was off and he wasn't as consistent because they got to him early, which is what they wanted to do and which they needed to do to win that game, which they did. So that'll be interesting for both teams to see if both of those pitchers are able to be consistent with their placement of their pitches.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't seen anything about lineups being posted just yet. I think it's still a little too early for that. But yeah, as we said, the Indians are going to have to play without a DH. So someone in the lineup, probably Santana, is going to have to come out. And I mean, Tomlin, to his credit, has pitched pretty well in the playoffs too. I mean, let's see, in the postseason he has an ERA of 2.53, and he's had 2 starts, and they've won both of their starts, both against Boston and against Toronto. So he's pitched pretty well too. He hasn't really gone that deep into games though. He's only pitched 5 innings against Boston and 5 2/3 against Toronto. that hasn't really hurt the Indians so much because of how strong their bullpen is. So it might not hurt them per se tonight, but it could hurt them over the next two games because, I mean, if it's a close game and Tomlin can only pitch like 5 innings, and then you have to have like Miller pitch 2 innings and Allen pitch 2 innings tonight, then they probably want to be neither of them will probably be available for tomorrow's game if they both have to pitch a considerable amount tonight.
No, definitely. That's another thing they're going to have to watch out for, is how many pitches their pitchers are throwing to figure out who they can use in these later games. So I think another part of this series is going to be tactical, strategy. How do you manage your lineups? When do you pitch your pitchers? And when do you use your bullpen? That kind of thing. Don't you think that's going to play a factor in this?
Especially these games in the NL Park, because at a certain point in the game, you're going to have to use a pinch hitter when your pitcher's spot comes up in the rotation. So I think that'll be more interesting with the bullpen usage, because like you're probably going to see like some double switches tonight, because let's say, for instance, Tomlin is like he's pitching into the 6th inning, but then he starts struggling and puts some guys on in the 6th inning, and the Indians want to bring in Andrew Miller into the game, but the pitcher's spot in the lineup would be leading off then the next inning for the Indians. Assuming they would want to keep Miller in the game for a 2nd inning, then they would have to do a double switch, something of that nature. So I think in that perspective, watching NL League games are kind of a little more fun, because it is more strategy from the managers, and there is more options and choices they could and have to make with pinch hitters and things of that nature.
No, yeah, definitely. That's definitely going to be a huge part of it, is being strategic like that in certain situations. Who do you turn to? Who do you use? Pinch hitting, pitching, going to the bullpen. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out too.
Yeah, definitely. So
interesting side note too is that both managers used to manage the same, or within the same division in the AL East. Because you have Terry Francona with the Indians, who used to be with the Red Sox. You have Joe Madden, who used to be with the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah.
So these are two managers that have plenty of head-to-head battles in the past.
Yeah, it's a rematch of the 2008 ALCS between the Rays and the Red Sox. With, as you said, Francona managing for the Red Sox, and then Joe Madden managing for the Rays, who the Rays ended up winning that series and advancing to the 2008 World Series. They beat Boston in 7 games. So, I mean, then I guess the Cubs are, I think Cubs are slight favorites in the World Series. So I guess that would mean Joe Madden would have beaten Francona twice then in big series.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see who gets bragging rights there.
Well, Francona had never lost a World Series game before 2 nights ago, Game 2, because when he was in the World Series managing with Boston, they swept St. Louis in 2004, and then they swept Colorado in 2007, and then he wasn't managing the Red Sox. It was John Farrell who managed the Red Sox in 2013 to that World Series. So Francona had not lost a World Series game as manager until Game 2.
Wow, that's pretty insane when you put it like that. But it shows you he is beatable, so the record may be very impressive, but it doesn't mean they can't be beaten. So I just think that's just a little side note here, that these two managers used to be managed teams within the same division, and used to be pretty bitter rivals, especially after that series where Tampa Bay won in 7. I'm sure Francona still got that in the back of his mind. Now he's got a chance at redemption.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm interested to see if that gives him motivation, which will further give his team motivation to beat this Cubs team that is, I would say, is probably the favorite at this point, just because of how they did in the regular season, just because of just how solid they are with their roster, top to bottom. Wouldn't you say Chicago's still the favorite here?
Yeah.
Within this?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, I would say that they're definitely the favorite in their own ballpark as well, because it fits their. I think it fits them obviously better than it fits the Indians having to lose their DH and having to like do all these probably double switches towards the end, late innings with their bullpen and stuff like that. So I think the Cubs are definitely the favorite, but I still think it could go either way because, as we said, both teams are still pretty evenly matched. Um, and I mean, if this game gets to be about if I think if the Cubs are gonna win tonight, I think they need to get to Tomlin early and sort of score some early runs and knock him out of the game. Because if it's an even game in the late innings, then I mean I don't see the Cubs being able to score off of Miller because he's just been that dominant. So I think they need to get to Tomlin and early and score some runs off of him. Because
definitely.
Andrew Miller, in the postseason so far, this postseason, he has appeared in 7 games, and the Indians are 7-0 in the games that Andrew Miller has appeared in this postseason.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You bring up a good point there. As soon as Miller comes in, I feel like it's going to be lights out. You know, he's been pitching well. I don't think he's going to stop. A really solid pitcher. So I think that if the Cubs have any hope of winning, they got to get runs. They got to get to the pitchers before they bring in Andrew Miller. Get to the pitchers early.
Yeah,
essentially.
Definitely.
This is key for the Cubs there.
I mean, as opposed to Chapman's been pretty good too. He's appeared in 9 games this postseason, but he has appeared in 2 losses. One in San Francisco and one against the Dodgers. So I mean, bullpen's pretty good, but I think slight edge on bullpens probably goes to the Indians, but I think the edge on starting pitching goes to the Cubs. So yeah, the Cubs definitely need to score early. Home should help them. But if the Cubs are trailing or tied even in like the 6th or 7th inning, and the Indians bring in Miller, then it'll be a lot harder for the Cubs to score, because I don't think the Indians bullpen at the back end here, if Miller, just reading the stat that Miller has every single game he's appeared in the postseason has been a win, then that would lead me to believe that Cleveland has not given up any lead in like the late innings in this World Series or this postseason so far.
Yeah, no, like I said earlier, I think when Miller comes in, I think it's going to be significantly harder for the Cubs to get any kind of offense going, just because of how well he pitches, how consistent he pitches. So I think, like we said earlier, the key is getting to their pitchers earlier. That way you have enough runs, you have a lead that you can kind of protect before they bring him in.
Yeah, definitely. Just taking a look at so the Indians only have 2 losses in the postseason here. One of which was against the Cubs last game, obviously. And then the other was against the
Blue Jays in that one game.
In game 4 of their series against the Blue Jays, which Toronto led that entire game. So yeah, the Indians have not the Indians have really not given up a lead and gone on to lose a game that they have been winning this entire postseason, which I think speaks to how good their bullpen is.
Absolutely. Because on the other side of it, they have a lead. You know, they can protect it because they have a solid bullpen.
Yeah, it just gives them that confidence that, like, if we have a lead until like the 6th or 7th inning, then the Indians expect to win that game with their bullpen.
Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see who strikes first. You know, how the pitching battle plays out, and if someone has a lead, you know, early on in the game, can they protect it throughout the rest of the game? It'll be interesting to see.
Right, so any last topics you want to touch upon before we close out the World Series talk here?
No, I just think there's going to be, you know, Wrigley's going to be rocking tonight because there's a lot of hype, you know, surrounding this game. Fans have been waiting forever for this. Even the older generation of fans, you know, who weren't alive for the last one, you know, are still very excited to be able to see that first Cubs World Series. I mean, who won? I mean, this is historical. This is history in the making. Since 1908, they haven't won a World Series. So I think that they're going to have a strong home crowd behind the Cubs. They're going to have the last at bat no matter how long the game goes. So I like the Cubs' chances in this one.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the Cubs win tonight, and then the Cubs will end up winning the World Series in either Game 6 or Game 7 in Cleveland. So do you want to transition here and talk about some other sports?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even other baseball news are talking about it because there's rumors that Yoenis Cespedes for the Mets has opted out of his contract and become a free agent. Right?
I don't think it can become official until after the World Series ends. But I think indications are that he's going to opt out. Now that doesn't mean he not re-sign with the Mets because he wants more money, but I think it would definitely be unlikely that if he opts out that he would come back to New York because I don't know how much more the Mets would want to pay him because he still has $47.5 million left on his contract.
Yeah, that's pretty good hunk of change right there.
Yeah, two years at $47 million. So I don't know how much more the Mets payroll and budget would allow them to offer if he's not going to stay for that amount of money.
You know, it'll just be interesting to see what happens with that whole situation. Because they weren't even sure if he was going to come back for this season, but he did. You know, he did really well with that organization, with that franchise. But there's been rumors, you know, I guess this is always going to be a rumor that when players just like that, big name free agents are in free agency, they're going to end up with the Yankees just because we have such a high payroll. You know, we're one of the, you know, elite teams of the league just because of how many World Series they've won. So that's what they're saying. That could be a possibility that he would eventually one day end up in pinstripes, but it's not even officially, like you said, I don't think, but that's just what's expected of him to opt out of his contract. So it'll just be interesting to see how that whole situation plays out.
So you think if he opts out of his deal that he then sign with the Yankees?
No, I'm just saying that was just tossed as a possibility. I think he's going to stay with the Mets just because he's done so well with them. They also don't want to lose him. He's a great hitter, so they definitely want to maintain him. Just maybe find a way to give him more of a deal that he's looking for.
And I don't think the Yankees are going to do that much in terms of free agency this offseason because it's not all that strong of a class, and they don't really have, other than needing some starters, they don't really have that many open spots on their roster because with now giving their young players a chance to play. Bird will be coming back from injury. Judge will be coming back from injury. You have Sanchez, obviously, Tyler Austin, Rob Rasmussen, So I think it's probably better for them to keep with their young players this next season and kind of give them a full season to see what they have with them before 2 years free agency from now, when the majority of like big name players will be on the market, and then um, the Yankees will have had now. I mean, with A-Rod off the roster, Teixeira off, Beltran off. I think CC will probably be coming off next year. I think then they'll start to be able to spend more money once they have all their current existing money off the books for the most part.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I agree with you because we had a very big transition in the middle of the season last season with the Yankees where they got rid of all their older players, with Beltran, they sent him packing. They made sure that A-Rod wouldn't be a problem going into the future. Teixeira too, and they also want to deal McCann, some of their older players, and they really wanted to try out the youth to see how they would handle being called up. And I think they exceeded expectations, especially with Gary Sanchez. They have a lot of great prospects waiting. We know with the trades that they made, so I think they're going to want to see how they do before they make any other big moves. Just to give them a full season to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because the little bit that we did see, it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
So, and I think the Mets, coming from their end, they're definitely going to keep their team together and just stay healthy because that was one thing that plagued them this year was injuries. It was injury after injury after injury with this franchise.
Especially in the starting rotation.
Absolutely. So they definitely want to keep them all together to see how they can do when they're healthy. Because obviously, they did pretty well considering the fact, all the injuries they had. They were still able to make it into the playoffs. Didn't win the wild card game, but I don't think they were even expected to do this well, with considering they had to call up pitchers that no one's ever heard of to replace solid guys in their starting rotation.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to want to try to keep everyone together, keep their bats together. They're going to want to keep the rotation healthy just to see how they can do. And I feel like if they do that, they're going to be a very, very good team next season and in the future with the Mets.
Yeah. I think their pitchers should all rebound pretty well, and hopefully for their sake get healthy again. But yeah, if they do lose Cespedes, they're losing like their most productive, dangerous power bat in their lineup. So the Mets weren't really that good of a offensive team this year, especially with runners in scoring position. So if they lose Cespedes, I think that would hurt them a ton, and it'd be interesting to see then where they would try and turn. Would they try and go after a new free agent? Would they make a trade? Because I'm not sure if they lose Cespedes, I'm sure their offense would be good enough to make the playoffs next season.
Yeah, it says here, considering how much trouble the Mets had scoring runs this past season, they're 11th in the NL. Bringing back Cespedes is easily their best pure hitter. Should definitely be a high priority for them. At least they want to contend again, make a deep run into the postseason next year.
Yeah. They don't make the playoffs by
They were with the Giants. Yeah, one game where the Cardinals had the Giants. Somebody had tiebreaker, so they had the home field advantage to get the number one seed in the wild card.
Yeah. And then with the Yankees, as you said, I think they're really their first decision of the offseason has to be what are they going to do with McCann, because Sanchez has kind of turned into their everyday catcher. So, and then you have Greg Bird coming back, who will be their everyday first baseman. So, where does that leave McCann, really? He'd probably, if they kept him, he'd probably catch, twice a week, maybe play first base once or twice a week, and then DH maybe 2 other times. But I don't know if he'd want to do that because, he's been primarily a first-string catcher in the lineup every day his entire career, pretty much. So I think that's the first decision that the team has to make in the off season. Are they going to keep him, or are they going to trade him? If so, where and what are they going to get back? I know Atlanta was interested in trying to reunite and get him back, especially since they're going into a new ballpark and starting to trying to end their rebuild and get good again. So, what do you think? What team do you think Brian McCann will be on next season?
It's tough to say. It really depends because I know I heard that was a rumor that the Yankees were talking with the Atlanta Braves about potentially sending him back there, which is where they got him from. But I think it all depends on what they get in exchange for him, because I think the Yankees are just trying to be smart, and get as many youth as they can to rebuild going forward. Because I think that was their problem, is they just had too many old players on their roster, and they just weren't producing like they used to. So I think they're just going to wait and see who could give them the best deal, put them in the best position going forward to rebuild their franchise. But it'd be interesting to see if he ends up back in Atlanta, see how that goes, because he was there before he went to the Yankees. And they're also in a big rebuilding mode too with their new stadium. They had a really bad season this year. So it'll just be an interesting situation altogether where he winds up. I think it's tough to say at this point what happens to McCann. They might even just try to keep him, like you said, to try to see if he can coexist with Sanchez, to give them another option potentially at DHing. So I think that's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
But I think as of right now, it's slightly more probable than that he'll probably just stay with the Yankees, and they're just going to wait to see if offers come in and see who can give him the best deal in the future.
I mean, I don't know enough about the Atlanta Braves minor league system to know what type of young players the Yankees could get back in a deal for McCann. But yeah, his role would be limited probably if he were to stay with the Yankees. Let's see. So this past season, I mean, also he only hit 242 this past season. He had 20 home runs, 58 RBIs, 32 years old for a catcher. So I guess, yeah, his career average is 266, and last season he only hit 242. So I don't know, do you think he's kind of, like, his age is kind of catching up to him in a way, that he's going to continue to kind of be either at this level of production or lower, or do you think he can get back to where he had been in the past and hit like 270 with, I don't know, 25 or so runs and like 80 RBIs or something like that?
I think as you get older, it's definitely tougher. I don't see why he couldn't, get back to the way he was before. But I definitely think that he probably has 2-3 years, probably, I think, to still be, an effective player for teams.
Yeah, because in that regard, if the Yankees are going to trade him, they should probably do it this offseason while he's still, as young as he could be, and in order for them to be able to get the most highest quality of talent back. Because if he has another year, I mean he was like, I'm not saying he's bad at all. I mean, he was 20 home runs, 58 RBIs. He was still good, but I think he's definitely, age is starting to catch up to him, and he's kind of not being as good as he had been when he was younger. So if he kind of has another similar year, then I think that will hurt his trade value for the season after that. So if the Yankees want to trade him, I think they should do it now. It all depends on if they want to do that or not.
No, I definitely agree. To get the most out of, the potential trade, you definitely want to trade him earlier rather than later, before he gets older, while he still could be, very effective for other teams, coming from their standpoint too, because who wants to take an older player who's not going to be productive or produce as much as they used to? They're not going to want to give up as much for him the older he gets. So I think if the Yankees are smart, they definitely should, if they're going to trade him now rather than later.
Yeah, definitely. So do you want to start talking about a different sport?
Yeah, or even take a break. It's whatever we want to do.
Well, the computer's not playing music,
Okay.
so yeah.
I could try using my phone again if you want.
Sure.
So yeah, if you want to just take a quick break and we can come back, talk about other sports. We talk about NHL, football, college football.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep, so we'll take a quick break here.
Yep.
So definitely stay tuned to the Nick, Josh, and Aero Sports Talk radio show. And as usual, please let us know, for all you people watching on Facebook Live, let us know your comments, thoughts, opinions, questions, anything. Just write into us and we'll do our best to address those for you. So stay tuned.